Hey everyone, and welcome to another OWHC Chats recording. And so it's interesting when we're always trying to uncover guests and think about who we'd like to give the spotlight to for this OWHC Chats podcast. It's one of those things where we think about, okay, if the OWHC stands for Supporting Comprehensive Workplace Health, what can we do to support someone who's doing some phenomenal work in the field of workplace health? And so, most recently, this led to us uncovering an initiative by the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. And this initiative is their inaugural Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award. And so, by us doing this OWHC Chats episode with them, we hope we are helping get the word out about this phenomenal initiative of theirs. So, for this episode, we speak with Jennifer and Wendy, and both of these individuals are board members of the Canadian Positive Psychology Association, and in particular, they're also the co-chairs for the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award, the CWWA. And so a detailed bio for both Jennifer and Wendy is in the description of this YouTube video. Also in the description of this YouTube video are the links to the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. And then most importantly, we're giving the spotlight to, because the links will also be in the bio, is the application for the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award. And so on behalf of the OWHC, we are thrilled to help support and get the word out for the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award. That said, here's the discussion with Jennifer and Wendy. Okay, Jennifer and Wendy, welcome to this OWHC Chats recording. How we're going to start is we're going to kind of touch on both of you, and in particular kind of ask both of you, why do you do what you do? If you want to share your passions with the audience right now before we get even to any details, perhaps even sharing your why. But in terms of if someone were to ask you, hey Jen, what is your passion? What is your why? What would you say to them?
Sure. So my passion is, and actually I would almost call it a calling to positive psychology, is I've always believed that if we change the way that we approach the way we live and the way that we think, then it'll actually change the outcomes in our lives. That's something that we can control. And positive psychology offers a place where we can learn from how other people thrive, and we can take those interventions and apply them to our lives. And if we're thinking about the whole conversation of well-being, it's hard to not include the workplace as well, because we spend so much of our time at work that my passion is that we have to find ways to find more work-life balance and include healthier lifestyles while at work as well. And positive psychology, I think the turning point for me is I've always read philosophy and metaphysics, and I wanted to bring it to also a place of science. And I read it and I thought, aha, here finally is a place that actually coalesces my two passions. And from that point, I went into a program to earn my master's in positive psychology, and now I'm just about to finish my doctorate because I am so passionate about it. So that's what's brought me to the Canadian Positive Psychology Association, so I can continue to be with like-minded individuals and share in the growing conversation about the importance of well-being for everyone.
Love that. And how when at that moment when you picked up the book by Mr. Seligman, was that just a coincidence you picked it up, or someone told you to pick up that book in the bookstore?
Well, it's fascinating you asked that question because at the time I had started a jewelry business, but the business was actually to create energy beads and sayings and affirmations that were attached to that. I also come from a background of being a yoga instructor. And at the time, I realized that what I was really enjoying is interacting with the clients as opposed to actually selling or being in the retail business, if you will. And so I was sort of at a juncture in my life where I didn't quite know where I wanted to go with my business. And I went to this, I remember that it was very strange because out of the blue, a stranger came up and kind of nudged me on the arm and said, and it was on one of those display tables and said, you should read that book. And I remember thinking at the time it was very strange that this sort of stranger had come up to me. And this is a true story. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go with this. I believe sometimes the universe offers us signals on our pathway. And I picked it up, went home, and I said, yes, this is it. So it's funny you asked that question.
Yeah, yeah. And Wendy, if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you that same question, the initial question there about, again, before we get into the details on this
Sure.
conversation, like what, if someone would ask, your passion and your why, what would you like to say to them?
Yeah, and I have to say that that's the first time that I heard Jennifer's background story, and I have to say that there's some parallels between her story and my story, and so I always like to say that I think positive psychology found me versus me finding positive psychology in a roundabout way. And so my story was I worked in the corporate world for over 30 years and had roles that were quite demanding and always within a leadership position. So I always had a team, but I naturally was gravitated to self-help books and how do I help my team. What are some of the things that I can learn that can help the team flourish and thrive and build up resiliency. And so that was what I was always drawn to, whether it was books or whether it was articles. And I would have workshops for my team, and it would always have some type of a self-help team type of theme to it. And what was interesting is that through my career, I was learning the techniques, the things like breathing and how to build your resiliency, and I really understood gratitude and mindfulness, but I never had a label for it. And it wasn't until later on when this when positive psychology kind of found me, and it was there's a label to this stuff. And I think I'm not unlike many of your listeners out there that probably do some of these practices, but never really, understood that they actually fall under what we call positive psychology. And like Jennifer, when I left the corporate world, for whatever reason, the universe kept bringing me to positive psychology. I remember thinking that I was looking at this yoga retreat. And as I was looking at the yoga retreat, there was a 5-day positive psychology experimental workshop. Then I would go and I would read like a newspaper or another article, and then positive psychology would be front and center. And so after about 3 or 4 times that positive psychology kept coming up, I thought, same as Jennifer, there's something in the universe that's telling me to get involved and get more into this science. And so I did. I became a certified applied positive psychology through the Flourishing Center in New York. I became a positive psychology coach, and lucky enough to be part of the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. So, I go back to the beginning. I think in a way, positive psychology found me, but I was always drawn to it, but never really knew what it was called.
Yeah, a couple things stood out from hearing from both of you there, and the one buzzword is you mentioned a few times, the science. So it's your passion for it, and the story, and then how there's the science in positive psychology and how you kind of appreciate the science side of it. Yeah. To think something in your mind and then be like, oh, it's called this. And, whether it's using the word, oh, there's a label for it, and you thought about it, and someone else thought about it that way. Like how like liberating that is. That's so
Mhm.
refreshing to hear.
It is. And one of the things that, as a leader in the workplace, some of the things that you do as a practice with your teams is sometimes you think, oh, this is kind of like common sense. And so you don't really think too much about it, but then you realize that there's a lot behind it. And, the research tells you that, you do some of these things and you increase well-being and you increase productivity and you increase engagement. But I think sometimes we just think of some of this stuff as the common sense piece of it and never really think about, the research or the science behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And with that said, because it's a nice place to like start, and love to go into kind of the purpose of this conversation, which Jen, you can lead us in here, is, first of all, what is the Canadian Positive Psychology Association for everyone listening? And then the initiative today, the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award.
Sure. So I just thought I'd back up for any listeners who is not as familiar with what is positive psychology. And then I'll go into who we are as an organization, association, all volunteer, and why we developed the awards. So just to add some clarity around what is positive psychology. I think sometimes people think, oh, it's the study of happiness, which is part of it. Is it just positivity? And my answer to that is no, not at all. It's sort of an adjunct of psychology, and traditional psychology in general terms really looked at how do we help people to get over their mental illness or work through their mental illness. And it was very it is very mental illness focused, which is super important. And then positive psychology said, okay, that's great. So if we can get people through their mental illness or living with their mental illness, or even just people to a neutral zone, what about that neutral zone to that optimal psychological well-being zone? Because there are things that help, such as mindfulness and attitude. And so that's really where positive psychology sweet spot is. It sits between that place where people aren't necessarily, they're not mentally ill, but they're not really at their optimal point of functioning where they can. Positive Psychology Association, and there are many organizations around the world that we work with as well, that we basically just bring together any of the latest research, any of the information, in particular though for the Canadian marketplace, but as I said, we work with the international as well, and we bring together all thinkers in this place and say, hey, let's share stories that work, let's share what the latest peer review academic papers say. And usually we do this in the format of a conference, as a biannual conference, as well as workshops and webinars and things like that. But due to COVID and the disruption there, we said, how else can we be reaching out to the community? And one of the things that really came out of some of the literature and talking to leaders is that some of the employees were really struggling at work, finding that new balance during COVID, which was a crazy time. So we said, hey, let's reach out to organizations and focus and put the spotlight on employee well-being. And the purpose of these awards, the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Awards, was really to ask people in the community across Canada, what are you currently doing in your organizations? Because we believe people are already doing programs. Share with us what stories are working. Share with us if you are integrating any type of formal well-being program, or maybe it's something a bit more innovative. And then let us form a community where organizations can talk to one another to knowledge share, really. And that was the whole sole purpose of the Workplace Wellbeing Awards. And that's really where we hope it grows as well. And we hope to get to the place where we can focus in on various industries and whether it's public or private. But for now, we basically welcome any application to come in from any organization that is really taking a step in the right direction to support their employees, and especially coming out of this last year, which has been incredibly stressful. So that's kind of the birth of where it came from and where we want to grow to.
It's interesting, Jennifer. Would you say that actually it was the pandemic that really made you think about, okay, what else can we do? What different audiences can we reach? And then that's when actually the award, the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Award, like you began that initiative. So it was almost not because of a pandemic, as perhaps it could have happened even if there wasn't, but the pandemic really accelerated or and whatnot these conversations to then lead to this award initiative.
Yeah, I think it did actually in some way. I think that spotlight moved in a little more of a focus. It's something that we've always considered. Generally, our membership could be from organizations, it could be individual practitioners, it could be members of the academic community. But we really said we also need to, in addition to look at the more systemic places such as organizations where employee well-being matters not only to each individual, to leaders, but also to their future success. And so this, in a way, and I think this has been the case for a lot of people through this pandemic, is they've really refocused and said, hey, where is my energy best spent? And we will continue to support all of the individuals and academics and coaches, but we've now expanded into focusing on organizational as well. So definitely it's helped shine a spotlight. I think we're in an area that needed more light.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things, and we talked a lot about this, is this the time to launch the awards? And for all of the things that Jennifer just talked about, we said, yes, you know what, this is the time to do it. But we also did pause because we also knew that there was a lot going on, particularly in organizations where they now had to, think about how to, reach their employees differently, having their employees work remotely, et cetera, that we knew that, it wasn't a normal time. So would organizations be receptive to looking at this type of an award and wanting to showcase what they do, particularly given everything else that was on their plate. And so we had to balance a number of factors, but at the end of the day, as Jennifer said, these awards are about, showcasing the innovation and just the day-to-day activities and programs and the specialness that organizations are doing to help the psychological well-being of their employees. And what better thing to do than to be able to share that and to celebrate it. And that's what we ended up launching the awards in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and if I could add, Wendy, too, I think one of the important things too, and what we wanted to bring to the conversation and to the table through positive psychology, is that the conversation still needs to grow, and that well-being isn't just about physical well-being. Mind, body, spirit are 100% connected. They feed into each other, absolutely. But the predominance of well-being wellness programs has been the physical, and it's not just to take away from the physical, that also has to continue. But the addition has to be the mental or the cognitive and the psychological aspects of well-being as well.
Yeah, and it's this very robust and clear connection between what sounds to be between positive psychology and the benefit in the workplace. And so if someone were to ask, okay, why now? What, like, let's go to yourself, Wendy. If someone asks kind of why now, I know we touched on it a little bit because the pandemic and whatnot, but yeah, why more than ever is this award relevant to organizations and to employees?
Yeah, no, excellent question. And so part of it goes back a little bit to the science that we had just mentioned previously, is that we do know that, in our research, that when companies implement well-being programs, that they help employees get that, north of neutral that Jennifer spoke about in terms of a sense of being able to thrive. We do know that from the research that it offers a sense of purpose and accomplishment. If organizations provide employees with a spot for psychological safety, and what we mean by that is that employees feel comfortable to be able to talk about what they're going through, and that there's acceptance around the challenges. It helps employees with engagement and meaning, engagement in terms of their work and more meaningful work, and obviously around growth and that social connections. And so that's just a little bit from the science piece of it. And we know that when employees feel more satisfied with their jobs, they are more committed to the workplace, and they'll be able to better perform both at the individual level and the team level. But I just want to go back a little bit in terms of talking about, the changes that we've seen and why this is so important at this particular time, and for companies to, to think about this in a different way than what maybe they've been thinking about it previously, as Jennifer noted, in terms of that mind, body, and spirit connection. And so, the pandemic has certainly, turned things on its head, and from employees today, remote working from home. And not only are they working from home, but many of them are now homeschooling children or were homeschooling children. They're looking after elderly parents. And they're all trying to do that within, it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of juggling. We know that, for some, there's social isolation. I have a good friend who thrives on being social, and working from home for her has been really difficult because she doesn't have that social interaction. There's this whole thing, and it's been in the news a little bit lately, is around this whole digital overload, where we're all in front of devices, whether it's your laptop, your phone. Like there's just so much digital information that's coming your way. So you do need a break from it. You have your own safety concerns from a health perspective. And don't forget the financial concerns that some individuals will have because businesses have closed. And some are not reopening. You have job security for some others. And then you have this whole thing around the stigma of this, of mental health. And I think we've come a long way on that, but we still have a way to go. So when you think about all of those things, there's a lot of things in play that are, putting pressure and stress on the system, and particularly on individuals and in the workplace. And so we know that it's a cultural shift that we need to make, and cultural shifts can be daunting, and not every company understands, how to do it or where to begin. And so one of the things that we talked about around these awards is that when we do get some of these ideas from organizations that apply for the awards, being able to share that, it's almost like it's a helpful blueprint for other companies. And so, between science, between what we're going through right now, there's a lot of truthfulness in terms of really needing now to have a focus on a well-being, particularly in the workplace.
Yeah, and even just some stats to add to that, Wendy, as well. I mean, the World Economics Report in 2019, and this was pre-COVID, reported that stress and mental health issues can cost the global economy over $1 trillion. So you can imagine what that figure might look like now. And even in the US alone, McKinsey reported that workplace stress can cost the US economy up to $200 billion a year. So it just adds that not only, and you can, I'm sure that the COVID, and it'd be interesting to see the reports that come out post-COVID, but the pressure that's on the system essentially, and how that it's so important right now to support people and increase their resources when the demands just keep piling on.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, Jennifer, one of the things that we did before we launched the awards is that we partnered with a company called the WellBeing Labs, and we did a Canadian survey of the well-being of the Canadian workplace. And one of the things that came to that survey was that we found out that, almost 1/3 of all Canadian workers are not thriving at this particular point in time. They're getting through, but they're not in that stage. And it's not to say that we should take struggle out of the equation. That's not what the well-being survey is saying. Is that we all will always have struggle. It's how do you build up your resiliency? How do you move yourself out of that struggle to get more into that thriving stage? And so, right now we know that a third of Canadian workers are in that phase.
Yeah, yeah. And in the description here for this recording, we'll include a link to the launch webinar where a lot of those results were shared from Dr. Michelle McQuaid from the Wellbeing Lab. So anyone who's interested to get a hyperlink to that, they'll see in the description of this YouTube recording. Fantastic. And then, okay, so far, Jennifer and Wendy, we talked about both yourselves, your calling, passion, your why. We then talked about the Canadian Positive Psychology Association and positive psychology itself, as well as the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Awards. And we talked about kind of also why that's timely, why that's relevant. And so let's dive into a little bit of the kind of the details in terms of, someone who's listening, they want to know, okay, so what is the timeline? How do they apply?
Sure. So the awards, we launched the awards in June, and the applications are now open, and they're open until the 20th of August. In fact, if organizations apply before August 4th, they still get the early bird pricing for the awards. And the application itself can be found if you go onto the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. There's a landing page, and it's you can put the website up, but if you go into cppa.ca, you'll be able to find it. Basically, the awards close on August the 20th, and then we have a stellar lineup of experienced judges from both the business area as well as academic. There's a number of judges from the positive psychology areas, both in research, in coaching, business leaders, as well as entrepreneurs in the well-being space that will be adjudicating the applications. We'll announce the winner close to the end of October. And then on November the 4th, we actually have our event where, we won't announce the winner. We will contact the winner at the end of October. The big winner announcement will be in their event on our virtual event on November the 4th, where we'll announce the winner and have our virtual awards ceremony. So we talked on a little bit of who can apply. We debated long and hard in terms of trying to, do we look at categories for the awards in terms of organizations? And at the end of the day, we said, you know what, let's just open it up to everybody. We were just at that point when we were looking at the awards, we weren't even a year into the pandemic. And it's like, you know what, we want to know what organizations are doing. Let's not limit it to a particular size of organization. If you're a school, if you are, an agency, if you are, for profit, not for profit is open. We just want to hear from you. We want to be able to celebrate, and we want to be able to share. Now, for the winner will receive what we call a virtual badge that they can use in their marketing materials, on their website, for their social media. One of the benefits of this, they can use it in their email signatures. The benefits of that is that, we know there's a lot of movement of employees right now. People are really looking at companies that are putting, their money behind their words in terms of supporting what employees need in the well-being space. Of the Workplace Wellbeing Awards will certainly help from a recruitment perspective and other HR related activities. We'll be acknowledging them at the awards ceremony. There will also be some activities that will be acknowledged by the CPPA and the media. And also we will be giving the winner their own webinar from the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. We'll customize that to the needs of their organization. And at this time, we are looking at, we have one major winner, but we are looking at, depending on the applications, to having obviously some runners up as well, and maybe some honorable mentions. And so right now, what we're encouraging is that regardless of the size of your organization, the size of your program, please, think about applying. We just want to hear from you. We just want to be able to celebrate and share.
Yeah. Put recognition out there. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing, Wendy. I appreciate you going over those details and sharing the dates, as well as what's in it for the winner. And so what we'll do as the kind of concluding thoughts here for both of you is love to just open it up and say, is there anything that we've talked about that you want to emphasize, or anything that you'd like to share to the audience that we haven't talked about, whether it be about positive psychology, the Positive Psychology Association, or even further details you'd like to share about the Canadian Workplace Wellbeing Awards? And we'll start with you, Jen, and then we can go to Wendy and then conclude the recording here.
Oh, thanks, Nate. Yeah, I guess I want to stress as well, I think applying for awards can sound like a very daunting experience. And we really wanted to narrow this down to the essentials. And really, this is storytelling, it's sharing information. So the application is very straightforward. There are about 7 questions, maybe 8 questions online. You can just fill it out through what's called a WUFU form. And really, it provides also people who are doing the programs, leading the programs, organizations who have organized the programs, time to reflect on the positive contributions that they've made for their employees as well. And it's a place to jot that down and really create that story. And that has a ripple effect in and of itself when you're able to actually bring that story together and share it with others. And then we hope to do a post from the ceremony, a post event of some sort. We're just formulating right now, just figuring out through COVID, but how all the organizations can continue to talk to each other, whether that's through a roundtable or whether that's through some white papers that are shared, qualitative research, focus groups, things like that. But really just to keep this conversation moving forward.
Yes, fantastic to hear. And Wendy, what would you like to share?
Just echo everything that Jennifer just said. One of the things that I didn't mention about my why for positive psychology is, my purpose is to really help educate around simple things can make big differences. And, everyone's heard the small acts of kindness thing. But I firmly believe that just doing, if I could educate people out there on just doing a simple thing, a very easy thing to do in kindness and just, even applying for these awards, it can make a difference. And Jennifer alluded to that ripple effect. So, as an organization, big or small, please consider applying. We would love to be able to showcase. And again, one simple thing can make a big difference.
Yeah, well said. And I'll even emphasize it here. Simple things can make big differences. And so with that said, Jennifer and Wendy, thank you very much for your time today.